Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm very pleased to have with me as my guest Alson Kemp, who's a retired partner from Pillsbury. Alson, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
So, Alson, I know you've got this incredibly legendary career that I've heard about from your son, Colin, but maybe you can start by telling me why you went to law school in the first place. Was it a childhood dream or anything?
No, it was a complete surprise. My father had a life insurance agency, and it was planned. Back in the 50s, you didn't think about all this stuff. You just did it. I was going to go to business school and take over, work for, and then with my father and take over his life insurance agency. And one day in my senior year in college at the little school called University of Chattanooga, it's now a big school,
Uh-huh.
University of Chattanooga, Tennessee at Chattanooga. A professor walked up and said, "How would you like to go to law school?"
Huh.
And I said, "Well, gee, I don't know." And anyway, to make a long story a little shorter, he offered me a no strings attached grant to go to the University of Cincinnati Law School.
Really?
My father said, "1 year of law school never hurt anybody. You ought to go." So I
Uh-huh.
did, and I
Huh.
liked it.
And did you have any idea what kind of law you were going to do or anything like that?
Well, a sort of a mentor of mine, if you will, was a very famous personal injury, mainly trial lawyer in Chattanooga, whom I knew as a family friend.
Okay.
And once I was in law school, I always planned to go to work for him, and eventually did.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I kind of always knew I was going to be a litigator, but I had no idea how it was going to work out.
Yeah. Well, what kind of litigator did you end up being, and how did your litigation career evolve then from there?
Well, it's sort of an unusual story for Pillsbury. Of course, I got out of law school in the 60s during the Vietnam War, and I was from the South, and boys my age back then went into the military just because that's what you did.
Right.
So I signed up for the Air Force in the legal department. And I went to Vandenberg Air Force Base down by Santa Barbara for 3 years and tried lawsuits. I ended up sort of the DA of the base.
Hmm.
And when I got out of there, I went back to Chattanooga. I got a job with this really great, best lawyer I ever saw, best trial lawyer I ever saw, for a couple of years. But I missed California, and I came back, and he said, "If you're going to go that far and gamble, you might as well play in a bigger game." And that was Pillsbury as opposed to some other offers I had.
Hmm.
And I walk into Pillsbury, they didn't do laterals back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And I had tried, I don't know, more than 20 and less than 50 lawsuits. And there weren't many people at Pillsbury that had tried that many lawsuits.
Hmm.
And so eventually, actually, I got put in the Chevron group to start with for reasons that I never understood. But very soon I was asked to go over to litigation and start handling cases, which in the first year you're with that firm is kind of unusual.
Hmm.
But as I said, I had tried a lot of lawsuits already. So I ended up handling things at Pillsbury that most people that were sort of unusual. If it was some strange case in Bakersfield, send Kemp. And so off I went. Bakersfield and Reading and Moline, Missouri, and
Huh.
very
So,
strange. But I also handled. I mean, actually, the first case I handled at Pillsbury, the reason I was brought into litigation was a very large case back in those days. Heck, this was in 71. It was
huh.
$103 million brought by Melvin Belli.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, to some degree, I entered commercial litigation quite rapidly.
Hmm. So what kind of commercial litigation did you end up doing? How did your career kind of evolve from there after starting off with Chevron and all that?
Well, actually, the first cases, I had sort of a split thing. The very first case was with a man named John Bates. He was the senior litigating partner and eventually senior partner of the firm. he handled big time commercial litigation. I got stuck with him, or luckily got placed in his activity the very first case because this was that big case. But we also, back in those days, Pillsbury was sort of the in-house legal staff for the telephone company,
Mm,
which was basically personal injury,
mm,
all the things that happened with all those trucks out on the road.
mm,
So I did big litigation with Jack, Mr. Bates, and I did personal injury and all kinds of stuff for the telephone company.
mm,
And that lasted about a year, 2 or 3 years. And then I got asked to take on some statewide litigation for Chevron involving their property tax on their oil fields.
mm,
Really hundreds of millions of dollars.
mm.
Um, and I did and handled that for, I mean, lots of other things were going on. It wasn't just one thing,
Yeah.
but I handled that for a long period of time, 4 or 5 years, plus the other stuff. And then I was a partner um, well by then. And when that got finished, I did commercial litigation. And then, I mean, contracts and suits against contractors and just anything. I handled several large cases for Chevron,
Mm,
um, and then product liability mainly.
mm,
And then one day, someone walked in my office or called me and said, "We've got these huge property tax problems for the timber industry. And would you, excuse me, I had turned that off before, I thought. Um, and would you take these cases?" And of course, I said yes. And
mm,
then I began to do timber litigation, all kinds of stuff.
mm.
And did a lot of environmental work. I
That's
mean, I
good.
was still doing commercial and product liability cases for other clients in the firm. I was a generalist. Anyway, that's more than you wanted to know, Richard. But
Interesting. So did you end up doing a throughout your career, did you have a lot of trials? Most of these cases go to trial,
no,
or these cases didn't
no,
go to trial?
I probably tried more cases than most Pillsbury partners, but compared to what I would have done
Mm,
if I had stayed in Chattanooga, as an example,
yeah,
I mean, the cases are so huge
right.
and they last so long. I tried a condemnation case for the expansion of the Redwood National Park for a timber company. And the condemnation was legislative condemnation occurred in 78. And I was in a 10-month trial
Huh.
in 88
Wow.
involving that condemnation. And in
Yeah.
fact, the chief judge presented everyone with a birthday cake, noting that what we were arguing about had taken place 10 years before. So, and that was a substantial piece of litigation. So you
Yeah.
only get to try one of those every decade.
Now, are you one of those lawyers that really just enjoyed your legal career until the very end? Some lawyers, they burn out after 20 or 30 or more years. What about you in your case?
Well, so at the end of, well, by sort of chance in the early 90s, we bought some property up outside of Healdsburg, California,
Uh-huh.
to make a weekend place, which we did. And we then kind of fell in love with it. Toward the end of the 90s, I decided that while I still loved Pillsbury, I love Pillsbury to this day, and I still was enjoying litigation and work. I must admit, I wasn't really all that excited about arguing with people about interrogatories.
Uh-huh.
But more important, I decided I wanted to do something else.
Hmm.
I put in a vineyard. And as I said to my partners when I announced I was leaving, and they came in to say, "Why in the name of gosh are you leaving?" I said, "I'm not mad. I'm not sad. I'm not sick. And
Hmm.
it's just time to do something else.
Oh,
And I did.
interesting. So you retired early to start a vineyard, basically?
Well, I retired when I was 58.
Okay. Well, not too early. Yeah. Interesting. Huh. Okay. And how's the vineyard worked out? Has that been?
Well, it was so I'll give you just, I mean, when I have similar discussions with people, my friends and my sons and other people, I say, well, no, look, I mean, I had a wonderful time for 35 years practicing law. I then left beloved law firm. I actually practiced 2 more years because I had cases I couldn't get rid of.
Yeah.
Um, and I started a vineyard. I ran it for 18 years or so. I had a wonderful time doing that. I learned a lot. I mean, I did a lot of work myself. It wasn't a huge vineyard. It was 5,000 vines, made about 25 tons.
Hmm.
I got mad about a situation up here where our local hospital was going down the tubes. So I created a charity to support it
Hmm.
successfully.
Hmm.
It's still here. And then the timber company that I was most associated asked me to go on the board, and I did.
Hmm.
And then, anyway, another family company asked me to go on the board, and I did.
Hmm.
So I did board work for 15, 18 years. And so there are lots of other things out there besides the practice of law. I loved the practice of law. I recommend the practice of law. I don't think it's going to be outsourced as much easily as other things. Everything about it was great,
Hmm. Interesting.
but there are other great things in life.
Yeah, it's clearly. Were you instrumental in persuading your son Colin to become a lawyer and to go to Pillsbury?
Well, I'm not sure I'm supposed to say this, but I actually told him not to go.
But
He
it worked
said,
out. It sounds like it worked out fine.
he said, I don't have to listen to you, Dad. You know, and it's just worked out great.
Interesting. When you did leave law, did you find yourself missing it, or you were happy doing something else?
I answer that question a lot. Of course, I miss some aspects of practicing law. I love trial work. I actually love mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
There are many aspects that I like. I left because I wanted to go have a vineyard in Healdsburg.
Well, Alson, it's been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate your taking the time to share your incredible story and your career at Pillsbury and your life after law. So, really appreciate your taking the time to share it with me.
Happy to, Richard.
This is Richard Hsu and Alson Kemp. Thanks.